Welcome to the Podcasting Mentor Podcast, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are ready to stop hiding and start showing up on the right stages without the burnout. I'm Candace Dudley, podcast guesting strategist, and your go-to for turning interviews into your favorite marketing and networking tool. And guess what? My podcast guesting accelerator is now enrolling for summer. Yep, this is your sign to finally get off the sidelines and into the spotlight. Like my client, Kelly, who landed 8 guest spots in a single week after we worked together. She called it a no-brainer and said she'd 1000% do it again. That's the power of intentional guesting, and that's exactly what will help you do. Let's get brave, let's get strategic, and let's get you heard. Head to the show notes for more details on my podcast guesting accelerator. Welcome back. I'm excited to have a fellow podcaster on, Robyn Flynn. She not only is a fellow podcaster, but she works in that industry as well, like I do. So Robyn is the founder and managing director of Robyn Flynn Media, a boutique marketing agency that specializes in podcasts and social media. Before starting RFM, she worked as a talk show host and content producer for over 10 years. So welcome to the show, Robyn. And I got to hear about being a talk show host. So dive in and give us the snapshot of who you are and what you do.
It's funny because when you're a little kid and you ask people what do you want to be when you grow up, kids usually say fireman, policeman, teacher, those standard professions. And I was like, I want to do play-by-play for the Montreal Canadiens in the National Hockey League. That was my dream job since the time I was a little kid because I loved hockey. I'm Canadian, so obviously sort of goes hand in hand. And when I was a kid, I was like, oh my God, there's only men doing this. I had never heard a woman calling a hockey game. And my dad was like, so you'll be the first. Who cares? So my dad was always super encouraging, and that was sort of my gateway into radio. I ended up going to school to learn how to be a radio broadcaster, did an internship at a sports radio station, and that sort of parlayed into a 10 plus year career in radio. I kind of fell into content producing / talk show host at a news station by accident. That was where the job opportunity was at the time. So I was like, okay, I'll take it and I'll try it. And I fell in love with it. It was so much fun. So, I did end up doing play-by-play for women's hockey, the now defunct Canadian Women's Hockey League. I did play-by-play for the Montreal team for 3 seasons, which was realizing a childhood dream. So that was really cool. But I love the fast pace of radio. If you're used to podcasting, everything feels so chill with podcasting because nothing's live. Imagine doing that, but it's live. So you call and your guest doesn't answer. Well, you're live on the air. You got to figure something else out. You got to call somebody else. You got to have a backup plan of something to talk about. Usually for a podcast, you're booking maybe 1-2 guests a week. I was booking anywhere from 12 to 14 guests a day, 5 days a week. This was just the pace that it was. That was just standard. So ever since I transitioned into podcasting, I feel so relaxed.
I can imagine. Well, I can't imagine the flip side, but I can imagine how relaxed and easy this podcasting seems hard for so many people, but if you had that first, how just chill that would feel. You said how supportive your dad was. That's so cool. I find sometimes when people are jumping into entrepreneurship, maybe they don't have family members that were entrepreneurs and maybe they're the first. Maybe you can give some advice about if you don't have that support, if you don't have that support, or if you do, and how that can impact your decision making and your leap taking.
I was really lucky to have a dad who was always supportive. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, so my dad
same
busy. Love that. And there's a big age difference. I'm the oldest, and my brother is 11 years younger than me. So my parents were in it for a long time, right? But my dad was so good about zeroing in on each of our interests and becoming obsessed with them himself. One of my sisters is into music. She's a music teacher now, but he was always buying her clarinets and guitars and taking her to, symphony orchestras. He was super into it. One of my sisters runs a daycare. My brother's a chef. I was into radio and sports. Whatever we were interested in, my dad became obsessed with. It's not only important to have support, but it's to have someone who cares about what you care about. So I knew that I could talk to my dad about the stuff that interests me. He was the one that actually found the very first job posting in radio that I ended up applying to and getting as a traffic reporter, reporting on the crazy Montreal roads. I was like, I'm not qualified for this. And he was like, apply. I think you'd be great. And I applied and got the job. So, if you need someone in your corner, it doesn't necessarily have to be a parent or a family member. It can be a partner, a friend, whatever. I do think it's important to have that encouragement. I still get that from my dad, but I also have friends who are my biggest cheerleaders. Every time I have a crazy idea, because once you get into entrepreneurship, you're in it and you're always coming up with more stuff. They're always like, yeah, go for it, girl. They're super supportive, which is so necessary because it's so easy to be your own worst critic.
Oh, I love that you have that. I could not agree more. If it's just you and your thoughts, it can get rough from time to time. Tell me about that leap then. You were in a dream job. enjoying it, fast-paced life, and you left this stable job, safe job, like so many of us do. I left teaching and heard lots of comments about it, but it's so safe. Tell me about that leap and how did you do that? Why did you choose to jump into entrepreneurship?
Everything kind of changed for me when I had my daughter. So as for many women, once you have kids, you kind of reevaluate your life. As much as I loved working in radio, the hours are crazy. You're either working the morning show, which means you're at work at 3, 4 in the morning, or you're working the evening, like the afternoon drive home show, which is what I was doing. So you're on the air from 2 to 6, which means your workday is kind of like 10 to 11 till about 7, 8. Good luck finding daycare that is open past 6 p.m. And the ones that I could find, they were meant for like lawyers and doctors. So they cost a fortune. I'm in Canada. We have subsidized daycare. So it was a difference of paying, daycares here are open like 8 to 4, 8 to 5, whatever. That would be $200 a month. Canadian, so that's like $150 American, versus paying like $2,000 a month, which it was a huge difference. And I was like, well, I can't really afford to do that. I need to figure something else out. And that was when I decided not to go back to work after my maternity leave. And I had to sort of look at my skill set and be like, okay, what are my skills and what can I do with this? I didn't want a traditional 9 to 5 job. I wanted to have flexible hours so I could be with my daughter. Even after a year of maternity leave, I didn't feel ready to be away from her full time. So even once she started daycare, it was just part-time. She was there for 3, 4 hours a day. And I would work a lot when she was at daycare and then try to balance both when she was at home. Now she's in daycare all day from 9 to 3. So mommy gets like 6 uninterrupted hours, but I still get my afternoons and evenings with her. It's me and my daughter, my husband works. So it's her and I from 3 to 6 every single day. We can go to the park, we can paint, we can do activities. That's my dream life. That was the goal, to spend time with my daughter. And my transferable skills were audio editing, talking, being on the air, being in front of a microphone. So I was like, okay, let's go into podcasting. Like, I think I could do this. And it has worked out pretty well for me so far.
That is so true for so many of us, especially moms. You have kids and your priorities shift in your life drastically. It did for me too. So you jump into podcasting. I want to kind of touch on why podcasting would be a good fit for someone, why you chose to use it as the strategy, the tool in your business. Can you go into that a little bit?
First of all, you need to have something to say. If you're going to start your own podcast, what are you trying to say? What's your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? So one advantage of working in radio is a very corporate environment. It's owned by a big media conglomerate, the one I worked for anyway. So you have your quarterly goals, your year-end performance reviews. So I was very used to a structured environment. So taking that information allowed me to build a structure for my business. So this is something I go through with all my clients. I had a discovery call this morning with somebody who says, I write a blog. I have a lot to say. People are telling me I should start a podcast. I was like, okay, but what is your goal for this podcast? You have something to say? Great. We'll check that off the list. But what's your goal? Are you trying to get more people to your blog? Are you trying to position yourself as a thought leader, as a political pundit? Are you trying to appear on other podcasts? Or are you just doing this because it's fun and you want to do it for fun? That's a totally valid reason too. But just understand what your goal is, because I think some people go into podcasting thinking they're going to be the next Joe Rogan or Alex Cooper. Very few podcasters are going to monetize to the point where it's a full-time multi-million-dollar career. For the most part, podcasting is a passion project, or it can be a marketing tool, a vehicle to promote something else that you have going on. Like, I only just started my own podcast a few months ago. This is still new for me. I'm used to being behind the scenes. I edit podcasts. That's mainly what I do. But it's really fun to move forward with it. One, because it allows me to sort of put my money where my mouth is. So I can try out new strategies, new techniques on my own podcast. I get to play guinea pig. And then I can go to my clients and be like, well, I tried this with my podcast and it worked really well. And they're like, wow, okay, great. Let's do that. So that's one benefit. And it also allows me to like promote my business. That's ultimately my goal with my podcast, is to get more clients to come and work with me. I think it's worth going into podcasting 100%, especially women. We're so reticent to use our voices, but just know what you want out of it. What is the reason? Is it just, I want to do a podcast? And then you realize, oh my goodness, this is so much work and you're going to stop after 3 episodes. Maybe take a step back, think about it a little bit, put some planning into place, consult with an expert. You don't have to hire someone necessarily to edit your podcast for you, but you can pay to meet with someone for an hour and pick their brain and learn how to do it yourself. I think that's totally valid too.
Yes, there's so many levels at which you can enter podcasting. I started with Googling and just figuring it out and trying things and seeing what worked myself. But you can definitely speed up your process if you can find someone like you and I, where you could pick their brain or invest in an hour, like you said. It doesn't have to be this like whole thing where you're ready to spend hundreds of dollars every month to pay someone to produce your show just to get it out there. So there's a lot of entry points in podcasting. I think it's easy to think it's the last option, because the big one where you're investing, because typically people that are listening to podcasts on a regular basis, they see those big ones, and that's like our vision of what it has to be. But it can be just so much easier, calmer, low key than that. And I like that you brought up a lot of different reasons. One, it can just be for fun. One, it could be a marketing tool. Like, all of the reasons are valid and they're okay, but it is important to know that. I agree, going in, because it can really drive what you're doing. If it is a marketing tool, then your episodes are probably going to be a lot more specific. You're going to have more specific guests on. It just changes and shifts things of what you would be doing based on your intention for it.
And you also have to know, what are you going to do to promote it? Because recording a podcast and hitting publish, it isn't really enough anymore. No matter how good your SEO is, you're going to get like 3 listens and 2 of them are your mom. You need to have a plan to promote your podcast. So whether that's social media, guesting on other people's podcasts, like there are strategies you can put into place. You have a newsletter, plug that podcast in there, embed it on your website. Like there's a million different ways you can do it, but that also has to be mapped out in advance. I think people get so excited and they're like, what mic do I buy? Do I need a ring light? Like that exciting part. And I'm like, that almost doesn't matter. Yes, a good quality mic, very important. Not going to say it's not, but also having good content and a good marketing strategy is also important. That's kind of where social media ended up coming in. I started just focusing on podcasting, and then everybody wanted a social media marketing strategy to go with it. When I started doing that, I was like, oh, I really like doing social media stuff too. So now I have clients that don't even do podcasts at all. I have just purely social media clients, which is really fun. So it kind of divides it up because I have different kinds of clients with different needs, right?
Keeps you on your toes, keeps things fresh every day. You kind of touched on it. What else would you say, other than having something to say, what makes someone a good podcast host or guest?
The ability to listen is key. It's very easy to talk. I mean, personally, for me anyway, it's very easy to talk, but it's really hard to listen. It's so easy when you're doing an interview to listen to what the guest is saying, but not really hear them, and to be thinking about what your next question is going to be. I have a really great sort of cure for this, actually. Back in the day when I was 18 and figuring out what I wanted to do with my life, I went to professional theater school. I had done some school plays in high school, and I was like, I love acting. Maybe that's what I want to do. So I did a 3-year like diploma conservatory style theater education. And I had a teacher who, to combat this inability to listen, he didn't want kids on stage who were just waiting for their cue for their next line. He gave us scripts, but he blacked out all of the other person's lines so that you couldn't see their lines and you didn't know what your cue was. And it forced you to listen to what they were saying so that you knew when it made sense to chime in with your next line. And it was such an incredible, eye-opening exercise that I've been able to sort of carry forward in so many scenarios, to just remind myself constantly to actually listen to what this person is saying and maybe think a little less about what I'm going to say next. And it sounds silly, but I would say that's my number one advice, especially if it's a guest style podcast. Listen to what somebody is saying. That's key. And if you're not doing a guest style podcast, this is like radio training. You're speaking to one person. If you're standing on a stage in front of 400 people, you're speaking to a crowd. You're all in it together. You're all in the room together, so you can address a crowd. To everyone here today, it makes sense. You're a big crowd of people. But when you're on the radio or you're hosting a podcast, the people are listening alone in their car, alone in their headphones while they're doing the dishes. You're speaking to one person. So as soon as you say like to everyone out there, it's very isolating because they're not part of a crowd. So that's my second piece of advice, is when you're doing a non-guest style podcast, just remember you're talking to one person. Using the word you a lot is a great way to form that connection.
Love that tip. I've actually heard that as well, and I try to be really cognizant of that, because I find myself when I listen to others or even read a social media post, and if it's saying, hey guys, or even if you're on your stories and you're just like talking quick, I also try to be really intentional about saying you, because it's just one person watching you. It's easy to just watch it or hear it and discount yourself or like not include yourself in the group because it doesn't feel like you are in a group. I love that advice. It makes it so much more personal.
Yep, absolutely.
So you mentioned guesting, and I have been really big on this year in particular, just as a tool, a strategy, even a marketing strategy that can really work for someone. And I know that you've started thinking, what has that done? Or even the clients you have, what has that done to support someone in their business with their visibility and growth, or for your personal self?
It's amazing because I think a lot of people will ignore a podcast if it doesn't have a high number of viewers or listeners or whatever. They'll be like, oh, only like 50 people listen to that. No big deal. But then I'm like, imagine you had the undivided attention of 50 people to listen to what you need to say, to sell your offer, to pitch, whatever the case may be. That's huge. We've become so desensitized by like viral social media content that gets millions of views that we forget how big a number 50, 100, 150 really is. So I try to remind people to put everything into a little bit of context and understand social media. Yeah, you got 1 million views, but they watched your video for 4 seconds. Whereas when you have 100 podcast listens, they were listening to you for like 15, 20 minutes. You can't buy that kind of attention. I would say that if you can get on other people's podcasts, it's a great way to promote yourself, your own podcast, your book, your service, your business, whatever, because you get that undivided attention from an already engaged audience. They're already interested in the topic. Consider your podcast genre. Like if you're selling parenting books, you probably don't belong on Joe Rogan's podcast. I think there's a huge benefit to it, to appearing everywhere as much as you can. Position yourself as a guest who should be on podcasts.
So much there that I couldn't agree more with. 50 people in a room would feel crazy if they're giving you their undivided attention. That number that we get hung
well,
up
think
on.
how like stressed out people get when they were kids. You have to do an oral presentation in front of the class, and you've got 30 people looking up at you. And like, that was something I never struggled with. I was like, put me up in front of the class, I'll talk. Like, I remember in university even having like group projects, and the kids were like, if you do all the talking, I'll do all the work. And I was like, are you like, that's the easy, sure, deal. You go build that presentation, girl. And people are afraid to speak in public. Like it's very daunting. It's probably a little bit easier when they're not staring back at you.
I mean, actually, I'm one of those people. I don't like it. I feel like it's not energizing. It drains me. So I don't enjoy it. I get really nervous. I think once I get into it, I do a decent job, but I don't like it. So I usually don't do it unless my 2 best friends, sometimes we speak together and they kind of shove us into it. But that's why I like podcast guesting. It's such a easier, low entry, especially if you're thinking about doing a podcast on your own. That's a great place to dip your toe in. See if you even like talking, see how you feel. It can be a nerve-wracking thing in the beginning. A lot of us, we don't have jobs that we're positioned as that. I was a teacher, so I did speak a lot, but not to my peers. I spoke to little kids.
If anything, they're probably harsher than adults are.
It was like middle school age-ish, 6th graders. So yeah, probably. Are you an entrepreneur looking to start or grow your business while feeling supported and seen every step of the way? Join the Aligned Business Collective, the monthly membership I co-host with Andrea Hansen and Brittany Williams, designed for entrepreneurs like you. This is your space to connect, learn, and build a business that truly works for you, while we hold you accountable with our weekly calls and on-demand coaching. Head to the link in the show notes to learn more and join today.
There's also a business benefit to it because I've appeared on podcasts where they liked what I had to say and then they ended up hiring me as a consultant. Or, I've had a client that was a good fit for another client and booked them as a guest on the other podcast. Like there's a lot of overlap. Everything is an opportunity. It's networking, right? But we do it all remotely now. We all work from home for the most part. So you have to find your opportunities to network because it's still so important.
Oh, it can be a huge networking tool. I've done it so much for my own business this year that the ripple effects that you're talking about are huge, especially when you get on and give an intentional, a little bit of thought of like what you're going to talk about. Today we're chatting, podcasting things. That person then, that guest is going to come to top of mind when somebody else comes to that host because they're the ones that are going to get clients and questions and things, and they might refer you. Or I've had people say, I loved your guest spot. Can you come and talk to my membership? You don't know those doors that are going to open. So I always tell people, if you're going to start guesting, make sure stay in contact with the host, especially the ones that you really drive with and connect with on some level. You know how it feels. Like you get done and you're like, I could have talked to that person forever, for hours. And connecting and staying in contact with those people, following each other on social media, cheering each other on. You just don't know what types of collaborations could potentially happen. And to me, that's so exciting because the social media grind, I know you do social media for people, but like doing it on your own and feeling like you have to show up all the time sometimes feels like a little bit of grind. So a podcast for me or guesting goes a lot better with me, but you got to find what works for you.
Yeah, I'm curious how you structure your podcasts too, because I kind of take a social media approach to my podcasts where I try and put as much as I can in the can because life happens, especially if you're a mom, an entrepreneur, you have other things going on. And I don't want to be like the day before release date being like, oh my God, I don't have anything to release. What am I going to say or do? So I try to batch create as much as I can. Like I think I'm recording like 5 episodes of my podcast next week, and I release weekly. But it's nice because it takes so much of the pressure off. And it's like that with social media too. I tell people, schedule out your content. Pick a day to do your content. The way I do it is a day where I've done my makeup and hair. So if I think I look particularly cute that day, I have an ongoing sort of thing in my notes app in my phone with content ideas. I'm like, oh, I look cute today. I'll film 3 or 4 of those. And then I have them. And then I can just schedule them out for later dates, space them out so I don't look the same for 5 days. I think that's a great way to do it because then I always have content. It's a lot less pressure. And you can always adjust your schedule, right? If something happens, you're like, I'm inspired and I need to say this thing right now. I'll just reschedule the post that I had.
I do very similar. When you're feeling good, that's when you got to make the content because if you force it on a low energy day where you're like, oh, I'm not feeling this, it's going to come across like that when you post it too. So I do batch as well. I definitely batch my episodes. In the beginning, 4 years ago, when I first started out, I was still teaching and had 3 little kids at home. So I was never really ahead in my episodes. I just aimed to get one out every week. Over time, you take things more seriously. Back then, it was just a goal I wanted to reach. I just wanted to launch. I didn't have much other than that I just felt drawn to it. It became more serious and I took it more serious and not just this fun little thing I do on the side, So when that happens, then yeah, it's the batching. It's being planned ahead of time because then I can schedule emails. To my email list, I can schedule because I use that same content, it's like this double dipping thing. I recently added a blog tab to my website to turn the episode content into a blog to kind of double up on SEO. So I do the same thing. I schedule things on LinkedIn, Instagram, and then post on Threads and things like that, just because as a mompreneur, like so many of my audience and your audience are, things come up, sick kids happen, and it feels really great to just know that you're a few weeks ahead or however far ahead you are in having at least that prepped. So then I'll sprinkle in other content, but at least that's going out. Then I know that the momentum is still there for me and it doesn't, ever come to a screeching halt.
I would also say, don't be afraid to say no. Like people have tried to come on my podcast that didn't align with what I was trying to promote, that I've just said no. And that's okay. It's awkward. I had recently somebody who booked, I have a lot of automations in place for my podcast, and somebody had somehow slipped through the cracks and they booked a recording. And when I was preparing for the recording, I looked at their social media and there was a lot of concerning stuff that didn't align with my values. So I decided to just cancel the recording, and they were quite upset about this, but I was super honest. I was like, this is the reason I'm canceling. Just straight up. I believe in being honest. I wasn't rude, but I was like, I don't think our values align. I wish you the best of luck, but it's not what I'm looking to have on my podcast right now. And I think that's totally okay to say no, not only to guests on your podcast, but whatever, if you are working in a service-based industry, to say no to clients. It is normal for me to have a toddler sitting on my lap occasionally during meetings, and I need to work with people who are cool with that. It doesn't mean I'm any less focused. It doesn't impact the quality of my work, but you have to understand that my priority is and always will be my child. So I really like working with other women. I like working with other moms. I have a client who is a single mom, so we work around her custody schedule. When she's got her kids, I leave her alone. When she doesn't, we work. So working with other moms who get it is really, really important to me. And that's, not to say I don't work with men. Of course I work with men, but that my priority I gravitate towards moms. That's just where I feel most comfortable.
Absolutely. That's a good point to saying no, because your podcast, you have done the work. It's like your baby. You have built this know, like, and trust with your audience, and anyone you bring on, it's like telling your audience, I vet this person, I like and trust this person. And if you're going to bring someone on that's not aligned, I think that's the quickest way to shoot that trust that's not something you want to do when you're hosting your own show.
Well, there's freedom to podcasting too, right? Like I worked in a big corporate environment where I was a content producer for a talk news radio station, and there were journalistic standards in place. We had to present both sides of the discussion, the topic, the news item. I don't have to do that on my podcast. I don't have anything that I am bound by. If I want to present a completely one-sided opinion, that's my choice, and it's up to you whether or not you listen.
Absolutely. And I like that you brought up with moms and people being okay with the toddler popping into the meeting. It's that permission that we need to give other women, because at one time I needed it. I needed the permission. It's just giving it to all of us, saying you get to decide how your business looks. And if someone doesn't like that your toddler is going to be in, and like you said, my kids don't affect my work either. I can focus and lock it in, and I'm probably more efficient because I have kids and I don't have endless amounts of time than someone else. But if someone isn't driving with that, there's plenty of other people, so they can go there. Just knowing that when you are running a podcast, running any kind of business, you have that permission to make those choices for yourself and your business.
It's easy to be scared, have a bit of that scarcity mindset, especially early on. I definitely worked with people that didn't jive with me at the beginning because I had bills to pay. You want to work with me, you're going to pay me? Okay. But I have fortunately grown my business to a point where I don't have to say yes to everybody who inquires. And one way around that is sometimes if somebody reaches out and I'm like, this isn't going to be a good fit, I'll quote them a really, really high rate. And then sometimes they still say yes. And you're like, okay, but at this point, totally worth it.
Right.
Most of the time, though, they're like, okay, never mind. I'm going to go look elsewhere. And that's totally fine. Setting rates is a great way to weed out people you don't necessarily want to work with.
That's true. I noticed that in the beginning too, of you'd get, depending on where you fell on the rate, if you were high or low, you might get people that are looking for a lot, but not willing to pay a lot. And sometimes it's not that fun. So getting that price point right so that it feels good to you, but also brings you the kind of clients that you do want to work with is important. Having the courage to say no and trusting that more work is coming, the next client's coming, is a big thing too.
And you want to feel good about what you're doing, right? Like I could go back to my old kind of job in a corporate environment. I could go back to that sort of safety, but I prioritize and care about having flexibility. My grandma was having surgery yesterday. I'm my own boss, cleared my schedule. Good to go. I'm off today, grandma. I'm all yours. It's so much harder when you work somewhere to be like, okay, well, how much PTO do I have left? I have a deadline when I have to request that date. Is there someone who can provide coverage? What kind of preparations do I have to make? What's going to be like when I get back? Like, it's so stressful. And not to say it's not stressful this way. You've got to reschedule some meetings, push things around. There's still work to be done. But, I always joke to my husband when he's like, oh, can you take a half day on Friday? And I'm like, oh, let me ask my boss. Boss, can I take a half day? I don't know. Sure. Like, you get to make the decision. And it's always important to remember nobody's going to die on the table if you miss a meeting. It's not life or death. It's a podcast. It's not that serious. And I used to have to remind myself of that when we worked in live radio, because it feels like life or death when you're in a breaking news situation, especially like if there's been a mass shooting in your town or an earthquake or an election, whatever is going on, it feels like life or death. You have so much pressure on you to get it right, but it's really not. Like, unless you're a surgeon, it's probably going to be okay.
Right, exactly. I could keep chatting all day, but I want to make sure I get into what does it look like for someone to work with you?
I am a very organized. I'm a very type A person. So everything is very clearly outlined when we work together. There's an onboarding packet that you'll receive with a checklist of stuff for you and a checklist of stuff for me, so you know what to expect. We are going to do test recordings. We're going to do trailers, stuff to get you super comfortable behind the microphone and listening to yourself, because that's important too. I will have spreadsheets with the people we're reaching out to. We'll get to know sort of your tone, so I can even write your scripts for you if you want. And I facilitate all the recording. So I'm there with you. So I can, interject if there's a tech issue. I can troubleshoot if you're not savvy. And then we have a strict timeline for deliverables. So you'll know exactly when you're going to get a first cut. You can review. We can make edits to the show notes and the title together. And we're going to have a launch date plan. And we're going to celebrate. That's the other thing that I love to do, is celebrate those wins. Like, your podcast launched today. That is huge. You just achieved something. Your new episode came out that just achieved its most listens ever. Let's celebrate. I think it's really important to celebrate all those wins along the way. So if you work with me, it's going to be organized and it's going to be a lot of fun.
I love it. And you have a How to Start Your Own Podcast ebook that's free that we're going to put in the show notes. Tell us about that.
It's on my website, robynflynn.com, if you want to check it out. It's in the show notes, as Candace said. If you're not ready to work with somebody, this is a guide that'll walk you through how to buy it yourself. I have equipment recommendations from on the cheaper side to the more expensive side. I make software recommendations for recording and editing. I explain to you how to set up an RSS feed so you can actually get your podcast out to the world. I give marketing advice. It's basically a quick how-to guide to get yourself up and running. A lot of valuable information in there.
Amazing. And you mentioned your website. Where else can we connect with you?
You can follow me on all social media, Robyn Lisa Flynn, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, pretty much everywhere. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. So wherever you want to hang out, I'm ready to communicate with you.
All right, that's it for today. If this episode gave you a little aha or you're thinking about guesting on podcasts now, I'd love to hear about it. Screenshot the episode, tag me on Instagram @Candace Dudley, and let me know your biggest takeaways. And don't forget to come back next Tuesday for another episode.